So the early reviews for Spider-Man Homecoming are out, and I have not seen the movie yet. I did not get to see an early screening for this film, and neither did my co-host here on Geekdom Movie Talk, Reel to Reel Productions, Mark. We didn't get to see it yet, but I'm sure that when we do see it, we'll probably come back with thoughts on the film on this channel or on our respective channels, Geekdom 101 and Reel to Reel Productions. We'll see. But what I want to talk about here on this edition of Geekdom Movie Talk is the confusing madness that is the Spider-Man franchise and what's going on. Because, for those who don't know, like, Spider-Man Homecoming is the second appearance of Spider-Man in the MCU and the first solo movie. But the only way they were able to get Spider-Man to even come into the MCU is by making a deal with Sony, because Sony has the rights to the Spider-Man characters. This was, of course, due to a purchase that Sony made back in the 90s, ages ago, when Marvel was selling off their character rights. Sony had gotten Spider-Man, Fox got Fantastic Four and X-Men, and of course later on Disney would get everybody else. But right now we're in kind of a weird spot here because the future of Spider-Man is uncertain. So Mark, say hello, man.
What's up, man? Thanks for having me back on the channel. It's always good to be here.
I like how you say thanks for having me back when you were the one who grabbed me by the throat and was like, let's talk about this, please.
Yeah, it's true.
So this complete and utter craziness right now. So I guess what happened, I'm going to let you kind of give the story here, but, Amazing Spider-Man 2 got a lot of mediocre reviews. It made $202 million, but didn't do as good as the old Raimi movies, which was the lowest grossing movie in the series. And so Sony was like, all right, let's just give it over to the MCU. But the way the contracts are structured and the way things are going here, I'm a little confused about what's actually going on, because Amy Pascal, who's the Sony bigwig, I guess you can say, she recently stated that the Venom movie coming out is going to be part of the MCU. Kevin Feige gave her a weird look. Now, Kevin Feige's been saying that Venom is not part of the MCU, that's a Sony-produced film, and the whole weirdness here is that could it be that Amy Pascal screwed up and revealed maybe that Venom is going to be in the MCU and that's going to be revealed at Comic-Con or D23? Or could it be that she just made a mistake? Or could it be a much more sinister motive, and that is that Sony is going to use the Spider-Man characters and the success of Spider-Man Homecoming to get their own Spider-Man universe going and, in a way, trick the fans into thinking that they're all MCU movies, which I suspected they were going to do this a while back, but now it seems to be coming true. So what do you think about that?
If I have to choose one of those three, I would definitely say it's the third one. The thing is, and one of the reasons I really wanted to do this, although a lot of people might not really care, I definitely think that this is important looking at the future of the franchise creatively and financially. The LA Times released an article the other day basically talking about what is the financial breakdown, what is Sony going to make, and what is Disney going to make from this movie. And one of the big things they said is essentially Sony is making all the money off of the box office stuff, so domestically, worldwide, and everything else. But Disney itself is only going to be making money off of the merchandising rights. So you got toys, board games, dolls, whatever.
And there will be a lot of toys. That's a guarantee.
Yeah.
I already see them. You go to Walmart
Exactly.
now, you see them.
Exactly. So they are planning to make bank. And I really think that that is something that they probably have in mind. And one of the reasons why this mistake is happening over and over again, like we just see almost every single day, they go back and forth with this. Pascal is saying oh, it is, but it isn't. It's more like an adjacent story. And then Feige just comes out and says, no, it's not. Like, I don't understand what you're talking about. This is not going to happen at all. This is your property. This is our property. And Spider-Man's the only one that flows in between. So the thing I think is it shows, before we get more into like what this means for the future, I just want to say I feel like this really shows the difference between the studios, Disney and Sony. Disney is the largest media company in the world. They understand the value of something like merchandising rights, and they understand that's why we have 3 Cars movies, for God's sakes, is because the toy sales make about $2 billion each year or something like that. So this shows that they understand that they can make a profit even if they're not making anything on the movies themselves. And Sony has really been struggling with that over the last decade. They blew up with Spider-Man back in 2002, and they've been struggling ever since to come up with anything that even remotely comes close. So I can understand why Sony is trying to figure out a way to basically grab onto the Marvel Cinematic Universe's popularity and potentially make a universe of films on their own, just completely utilizing everything about that.
Yeah, and I want to make it clear that, Sony still has the rights to the Spider-Man characters. They've been trying to get a Spider-Man cinematic universe type thing going for a while. If you remember when Amazing Spider-Man came out, the rumblings were we're going to get a Sinister Six movie and a Silver Sable Black Cat movie, and now it seems like they are confident that Disney's marketing machine and Kevin Feige's vision, and of course Robert Downey and all the different things that Marvel has been successful with for the past almost 10 years is going to help them do that. But the thing is, it really does seem like they're using the MCU to kind of create their own universe and kind of make believe that it's part of the MCU when it really isn't. Sort of like what they did with the Marvel TV shows. Like, obviously we know for a fact that Daredevil and Iron Fist and all these shows are linked with the movies. That we know for certain. However, the events that happen in the show do not always have any kind of real impact on what happens in the movies. The movies are a much more grandiose type of thing. The shows are kind of more, closed in, kind of cerebral, singular character stories. I feel like that Sony wants to do that. I feel like Sony wants to make the Venom movies and their own Spider-Man movies and kind of have them in the Spider-Man universe without it really being in the MCU, so they can kind of wink and say, yeah, we're in the same universe, but we're really not. And that's kind of a weird decision. Now, I gotta be honest, I don't like this idea of a Venom movie, and I'll tell you why. Because Venom's origin story is so closely tied in with Spider-Man that I feel like Venom, if he's going to get his own movie, it should be a spin-off of a Spider-Man story. Eddie Brock is a villain. He's not a horrible person, as we find out in the comics, that he's not really like a terrible, he's not a killer. He just hates Peter Parker. But he starts off as an antagonist who's jealous of Parker and eventually becomes Venom. And part of the whole appeal of Venom, to make that story work the way it should work, is that Spider-Man has to have the black costume first. That way, when Venom gets it, he gets all of his powers and his memories. And that's why he knows who Spider-Man really is and has his web shooting and all that, and is immune to spider sense. That's part of the Venom character. Then, later on, you should go ahead and do the spin-off. But they're going to go ahead and do this Venom movie, and they're going to bring in Carnage, which should be its own little movie as well. And I just personally feel like I don't know, I think it's too soon for that. I think it's them really trying to milk money out of the fans by getting more Spider-Man stories out there, when really the thing about the Spider-Man universe that you really have to think about is that... What the hell was that, bro?
My phone.
Oh, okay. Well, put it away. Well, the thing about the Spider-Man universe you really have to think about is that all the stories are Spider-Man centric. Like, it's all about Spider-Man. Now, where I'm a little confused at is where Tom Holland stands, because from what we understand, and again, this is conflicting information, Tom Holland is doing 5 Spider-Man movies. There are going to be 5 Spider-Man appearances in the MCU. Civil War was 1. Homecoming was 2. Avengers 3 and 4. The one coming out in 2019 and the one after that. And Spider-Man Homecoming 2. And then that's it. Now, obviously, they can renegotiate. Obviously, later on, they can add more movies. This is not a signed, sealed, and delivered guarantee. But one thing that was revealed recently, which was very strange, is that Tom Holland signed on to do 3 Spider-Man movies. Not 3 MCU movies, 3 Spider-Man movies. So the speculation is that he's going to do Homecoming 1, Homecoming 2, or whatever you want to call it, the sequel to Homecoming. And then the 3rd Spider-Man movie is going to be in the Sony Cinematic Universe, but it's going to star Tom Holland, which is really going to confuse people.
Yeah.
Because it's going to have the same actor in 2 cinematic universes, but they're going to be completely different universes, but they're going to trick us and think it's the same universe. That's what they're doing right now, man. This is confusing to me.
Yeah, and that's the way I kind of took it as well, when you had the producers come out a couple months going, this deal that Sony and Disney have made is so unprecedented. We don't know how long it's going to continue or for whatever reason. And even back then, they even said, if I had to guess, I would say it was only going to last 2 Spider-Man movies, and then we'll see. And it's kind of goes to what you're saying. They're going to be probably building this greater universe outside, or maybe this is the general plan, is let's build this greater universe which Tom Holland's Spider-Man can exist in.
Can
That's
bridge.
yeah, can bridge between both of them. But once this deal goes off, once basically Marvel comes in and saves the cinematic universe of Spider-Man, then we're just going to merge him. And for whatever reason, he's not going to show up in cinematic, like Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, but he will still be a part of it. I mean, I feel
Very weird.
there's this interesting argument, I think, and I think we need to talk about this because I'm sure many of your other subscribers are familiar with your other channel as well as mine. You know, we've covered anime, especially Dragon Ball, before. We know kind of about that. I'm sure everyone else is a little bit familiar with that, or comic books in general. And let's be fair, as confusing as that is, and especially when you're talking about giant studios spending upwards of $300 million on a single project to bring, these characters to life and right in front of us in 3D and all IMAX, whatever. I really think that when you look at it at the smallest scope possible of how manga and anime movies or comic books have worked for years, decades even, this is nothing really new, and it's not something I'm personally, although confusing, I'm not necessarily mad about. I gotta disagree with you because we've seen.
It's not that I'm mad. I'm just more confused. But I'm in a weird spot. I'm very conflicted right now, bro. It's like a breakup. I just don't want Spider-Man to leave Marvel's hands right now, especially after the reviews that have been coming out.
Well, okay, but the one thing I think is what it kind of seems like to me when you look at the broader scope of how comic books have done this for years, and even some of the early criticisms of the cinematic universes that they've been making is, once all these characters become friends and know each other, why aren't they all on speed dial to come and take care of all their individual problems and everything like that? So, you have these sequel movies where you have Iron Man, Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, and he doesn't call the Hulk to basically come help him out of a jam. He doesn't call Captain America to come help him out of a jam. But that was something when this was all starting up in 2008 and 2009, everyone was up in arms about it. It's not going to make any sense. Everyone's going to be confused and all this other stuff. And that really wasn't the case. I don't know a lot of people who go out of their way to say, well, why wasn't this person there? Why wasn't this person there? And I really think that if the case is they were going to do a couple of movies, introduce Tom Holland in this Spider-Man role in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then allow him to go flourish in whatever cinematic universe that Sony builds adjacent to all this, that does wink, wink, kind of in the same vein that the television shows exist in, but not necessarily ever interacting again with Iron Man or Captain America or anything else like that. I personally think that that's kind of a good thing. It would be interesting to see, especially if they work together to make something really interesting where you have a falling out between, Tom Holland's Spider-Man and Captain America or Iron Man or all this other stuff, to the point where he just kind of swears it off and does his own thing.
No, I'm okay with that story. Don't get me wrong. I'm okay with that story. I'm just saying I don't know if I trust Sony to put out a good Spider-Man movie, even though obviously Spider-Man 2 from Sam Raimi was a good film. With this guy, Tom Holland, right? He's really young. He could play Peter Parker forever. And one thing I will tell you is that the thing about Venom, specifically Venom, is that I feel like the Venom storyline is one that needs to be preserved for a future adult Spider-Man story. Because young Spider-Man, like the way that I always felt, at least my vision, and of course it's only my opinion, is that young Spider-Man should be facing off against the Doc Ocks and the Vultures and the Scorpions of the world, and then you save Venom and Carnage, who are much darker characters. Carnage is a freaking serial killer. You gotta hold that off for when Spider-Man gets older, he marries Mary Jane, or whatever the story they're gonna tell is. Because I grew up on the 90s Tom McFarlane adult Spider-Man, but I later on went back and read the Silver Age, teen kind of younger Spider-Man, and I certainly love both. And I feel like the direction the MCU is going with Spider-Man, especially with what we've heard about this film, is that it's a young, still in high school Tom Holland, right? That's fine. But over in the Sony universe, we've got Venom and a really dark storyline that is something that I think is contradictory of what MCU's doing with Spider-Man. See what I'm saying? It's almost like we said, two different Spider-Man universes, and Tom Holland's the bridge, but Tom Holland is being conditioned to create the lighthearted Spider-Man, putting him in the dark Spider-Man. Maybe in a few years he'll be older and it'll work out better. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And that's really the thing is I personally think if they do this transition, it's going to be several years into the future. We're talking probably if they're still doing this 7-8 years into the future when these movies actually start to come out. Maybe then he'll be old enough. I completely agree with you though. These are villains and people that he has to fight at a younger age or an older age. I mean, and the other people like Vulture, Doc Ock. Although I do think that they should avoid Doc Ock and the Green Goblin, which is just a shame. But considering what Sony has done to the Spider-Man brand and what they've done to the villains of that brand, even though he has an amazing rogue gallery, you just can't use those people anymore.
You can't have another Doc Ock. I see what you're saying. It's too much, right?
Yeah. And so I don't necessarily know where they want to go. The thing is, it would be okay.
3 reboots in 15 years, dude. Don't forget that. It's 3 reboots in 15 years.
To me, the one thing I just can't get over, and I'm perfectly fine, like I've said, based on just my fandom of comic books, as little as that has been, but also manga and everything throughout my life, I understand that there can be, and this is how big extended universes actually do work, is that there are interconnected stories where people are basically even living in the same town or same city or something and never once see each other, and that's okay. I feel like Marvel's is going to be kind of too much of its own success right now, where people are still complaining about their television shows not interacting with the movies, and that's certainly a good point. But at the same time, they don't have to, and it's not necessarily unrealistic that they're not. I mean, you're talking about street level crime fighters versus the Avengers. I mean, they don't have to be interacting at every given point, but I can imagine that this is going to be overly confusing. But like I said earlier, this was something even just less than 10 years ago that was supposed to be really confusing. There was this worry that there was going to be a confusion about what are the people going to understand, the general audience? Are they going to know that this is not necessarily the Tom Holland Spider-Man universe, or why isn't Tom Holland fighting Venom in this particular movie, or something like that? And I don't ever think that really panned out. I mean, those were the early warning signs of the bursting of the cinematic Marvel universe or comic book bubble or something. It was getting too big for its own good. And I personally disagree with that. I think it's actually a really cool thing not to put the entire burden of creating an entire universe or things that can live in that universe all on Disney's shoulders. Because the thing I kind of am always worried about is they get too bogged down in the stuff that works, that they don't take any more risks. Now, that's not what they've been doing right now. I mean, obviously, they're doing a lot of stuff that is risky, stuff like, the Captain Marvel movie that's coming out, or the Black Panther film that's coming out, all of which have good teams across them, good actors attached to them, and will work out eventually. But at the same time, it's taken them, by the time those movies come out, it will have taken them nearly a decade to get them out in general. And they're already behind people like, they're already behind DC, who's already put out a Wonder Woman film to amazing reviews and amazing numbers, that shows that, yes, you can make a good female superhero film and people want it. There's a built-up demand for it, so why don't you put it out? Why wasn't this made 10 years ago? And it's just because they had to do with what worked, and they couldn't necessarily branch out as quickly as they wanted to, because it's just such a massive project with each individual film, not including the whole Avengers team up movies and everything that they have to put into it. The one thing I like about Venom being a part of this cinematic universe in Sony's court, the Sony one is in between Venom and Venom 2, if they're not doing some kind of weird non-Tom Holland team up movie, which would be stupid, you could have a Venom and a Venom 2 where there's absolute progression with the character, and you see this Venom character grow in between all the other films that he has. And And uh, that's really something that we don't necessarily see with Marvel all the time. And I'm happy about that because you'll have films like, although it's a very good film, you'll have films like Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which kind of feels like it's jogging in place.
Yes, I
And
agree with that. We talked about that recently.
yeah,
Yes.
it feels like it's jogging in place because you can't change this certain dynamic of the Guardians of the Galaxy team before Infinity War. You just can't.
No, and that's the thing is that I agree that the cinematic universe may be too big for Spider-Man, if that makes sense. Like, I understand that. I just, at this point, Sony has no equity with me, dude. That's the problem. It's like Sony, and I have nothing against the people who work there. I know they all work hard, and I respect, all those guys. I respect everybody. I really, really do, genuinely. But I feel like, again, they have burned me too many times with Spider-Man. I mean, again, 3 reboots and Spider-Man 3 was 2007, so that's actually 3 reboots in 10 years. Like, or 2 reboots in 10 years, 3 franchises. It's too much for me. It's just things need to stay the way they are right now because people are already confused. I mean, there's people out there who don't really understand why it's even being rebooted to begin with. People are already confused, and I feel like having Tom Holland cross to both universes is going to confuse them even more. But then again, you wonder, right? You think about it. You say, well, what if they hire a different Spider-Man? That's a 4th person playing Spider-Man now. So it's like, I think what they should do, here's my solution to all this. Have Sony do a Spider-Man universe with Miles Morales as Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can do, like in the comics, you've got the Ultimate Spider-Man, the regular Spider-Man. Peter Parker can exist in the MCU. Miles Morales can exist in the Sony universe. And then you fix the problem right there.
I agree. I completely agree. Or also, if they are just dead set on having Tom Holland come into their Spider-Man universe at some other point, but MCU doesn't want to give up a Spider-Man brand, then just switch it. Like, have him go in once he gets a little older and he can kind of envelop in these darker timelines or these darker characters and fight them, whatnot. Then have, for whatever reason, have Tom Holland Spider-Man or whoever is playing whatever character or something introduce Miles Morales into the cinematic universe, like a Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then just use him as the Spider-Man brand. I mean, the only reason I know,
the other one.
Yeah, the only reason I know they're not doing that, and I'm pretty sure, although I'd have to fact check this, I don't have it right in front of me.
Well, there's also talk of a Spider-Man animated film with Miles Morales that Sony's doing as well.
That's what I was getting to. So, like, that would also be confusing. So honestly, the only thing, like you said, I'm happy about this. I think that if they play it the way I was explaining earlier, I would be happy. But you're right. Sony has just kind of burnt not only me, but the general audience so much with Spider-Man that we don't even know if they can actually pull off a good Spider-Man movie anymore. I mean, quite frankly, it's been like 13 years since they've done a very good Spider-Man movie.
And the other thing is, and here's the other thing too, is, okay, Homecoming, if Homecoming is as good as everybody says it is, and again, we haven't watched it yet, right? I feel like the fandom is going to say, no, Marvel needs to do these forever. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? Like, I feel like they would reject, not the casuals, but, the hardcores would reject Sony getting that movie back because they're going to say, no, you screwed up. We want, we definitely 100% want Marvel, Disney to take care of this because of how good Homecoming was. I almost feel like, in a way, Kevin Feige had to make Homecoming a great movie for leverage. I feel like this is leverage for them now. I feel like they can tell they can tell Sony, look, you screwed up a couple times. So far, we're batting 100. Mm-hmm. Let us take care of it. Because if this movie's good and then Homecoming 2 is good, the people are not going to want to see Spider-Man go back to Sony, dude. Again, which is why they should have the Miles Morales thing happen over at Sony. Then they can still make money themselves. But then again, the whole thing's going to come down to, when do the Spider-Man rights run out? Is Disney going to buy them back? Is Sony going to even sell them? Very confusing. Very, very confusing.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is
the future is uncertain.
It is uncertain, and I just wanted to make it clear. The couple things I have on that note is, for one, I don't think they're going to sell them. It's one of their biggest properties, and Sony's been leveraging money for their film studio for years. It is not something that makes them a lot of money. They've
Hemorrhaging money, you mean?
Yeah,
Bro?
yeah.
Is that the word you were trying to say?
Hemorrhaging, yeah. They've been losing money for years, although they've also contemplated selling the studio. I think that would be a really bad business move for them, and I think that's why they haven't done it yet, because even though it's not something like, their electronic department or anything else like that, it does kind of create a revenue source that creates a merchandising and everything, and it allows them to basically do everything they've done with all their synergy pushes. Back when Spider-Man 3 came out, they actually released the Blu-ray of Spider-Man 3 on the same day that they were releasing like the brand new Blu-ray type of stuff. So it has really worked for them to have a movie outlet as well as all their electronics and everything that they've had just for decades now. But the thing is I really don't see them selling it. And one of the things, like you've kind of discussed here too, it really does pain me, even if this is all kind of true and they do make the Venom movie and they are planning to make all these, Silver Saber or Black Cat movie or anything else that they want.
Silver Sable, bro.
Sable. I'm bad at words.
Silver Saber.
I'm
what is this, Power Rangers?
I'm bad at words today. But no, the Black Cat movie or something like that. The thing that pains me there is those are characters that work with Spider-Man's character. Those are characters that need to be introduced to a main Spider-Man story. And Sony's playing their cards right now. They want to make this own cinematic universe without Tom Holland, without the original Spider-Man. And it just feels to me personally that even if for whatever reason they sell Spider-Man without selling the greater Spider-Man Rogue Gallery or something like that, because they want to make movies on that, whatever, then they are destroying a lot of potential creative chances that Marvel can do in the future.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it goes. I mean, we'll see what happens in the future. It's a lot of it's uncertain, and again, when it comes to these contracts, they can always renegotiate. Maybe we will see two different Spider-Man universes. I just feel like that would confuse the audience. And at this point, because of how many reboots we've had of Spider-Man, people who are casuals are already confused, and hardcore ones just want Marvel to take over. That's all they want. That's all I've seen. So, I don't know. Sony has blundered a lot lately. I just hope that they make the right decision. Check out Reel to Reel. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
Nah, I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
We will talk to y'all later. Let us know in the comments what you think. What do you want them to do with Spider-Man? Do you want two different Spider-Men? Do you want Tom Holland to cross between the MCU and Sony? Do you want Sony to stay out of it? Do you want Sony to focus on the Spider-Man side characters without Spider-Man? I don't like that idea, but they might do it. Let us know. We'll talk to y'all later.